Welcome back to another edition of What Really Matters. I'm Gary Sutton. I'm alongside of Charlie Giroux here, who's running for the Republican nomination for governor here in the state of Pennsylvania. And Charlie, good day to you, my friend.
Great to be with you, Gary, as always.
Always a pleasure amidst all the traveling that you're doing right now all over the state. And let's see, forums and debates and all that. Does it ever get old for you?
It really doesn't. I love doing it. The forums have become very interesting, Gary, because several of the Republican candidates have chosen not to participate in some of the debates. A couple of them, in many, Mastriano and Barletta have showed up at 2, maybe 3 of the various debates. They've chosen not to let the Republican voters of Pennsylvania see them, hear them, up close and personal, unvarnished, unscripted, and without reading other people's words off of a teleprompter. And then we had the biggest debate of the season a couple of nights ago, and the candidates that signed this silly, and I can't think of any other word to describe it, compact or pledge or whatever you want to call it, to not participate in debates unless a whole string of demands and considerations and qualifications, etc., were met. Well, the funny thing is they participated in other debates where none of those conditions were met, but they chose to duck the one where the media was going to be asking questions. Most of these forums, Gary, have been simply an opportunity for candidates to make speeches, and that's all well and good. The chest-thumping stuff is really nice for riling up a crowd, but now's the time when people are really going to start to take a close look at the candidates. And they're going to say, who can lead Pennsylvania? And they want to see the candidates really address the issues that are so vitally important to our state.
Let's talk a little bit today. I was going to talk about something else, but let's talk about the words. We use words every week. Well, how about today? The word words is what we're going to play with. And when you talk about the various forums and words and so forth, we hear a lot of verbiage. We see a lot of campaign ads and so forth, and words are said. But, one of the things that people want to know is, and I think people have a certain intuition to know when people own those words and when those words are feelings and they're passions that people have. Talk a little bit about that and from your particular vantage point.
The story has to match the words. In other words, your personal story has to match your public positions, and your public positions have to match the word. They have to be, in a Gary Sutton word, authentic. And voters get a very, very real sense of that almost instantaneously. They can tell who's telling them the truth, who's not. They can tell who's reading words off of a piece of paper that somebody else wrote for them, and they can tell who has the positions deep inside their heart and in their soul and is passionate about them. And that comes out in all of these debates. And they also want to see somebody who can stand up and look and act like a governor, because ultimately the job is to govern this state, and it hasn't been well governed for a long time.
One of the words that we kick around an awful lot during campaigns is leadership. It kind of gets like a retread many times, and we just say, oh yeah, leadership, and then we say, well, what's that? What is leadership? If we really try to dissect it a little bit into real terms that we talk about every day out here in the streets of Pennsylvania, what is leadership?
Well, leadership to me is the ability to bring people along. It's not pushing them, but rather joining them and showing them the way. And, servant leadership is something you hear a lot about, but I think that's really at the core. It's the ability to be a true servant leader, and in so doing, to inspire people, to show them a path, to show them a vision, and then to create the circumstances under which they can pursue that vision and make their lives better, their family lives better, and their future better.
We talk about how to govern. Obviously, governor is going to govern the state of Pennsylvania. We saw what happened when you micro-govern during COVID. We saw a lot of the wreckage that's left behind in terms of small business, and other kinds of businesses have been left behind because we had a governor who decided to go off on his own, away from the legislature, and just kind of go into a cocoon. When we talk about leadership and we talk about micro and macro leadership, is it good for a governor to go in and micro leadership every little thing, or is it better to have a vision and get the right people around him to do that job? What's your take on that?
It's much better to have a governor who lays out a vision, surrounds him or herself with the best people to be found, people that are better at what they do than the governor. And that's what I'm going to be building in my administration, is a team of people that are better at what they do than I am, and then giving them the power to fulfill the mission that you've created for them, because micromanaging simply doesn't work. The state government is way too big and way too complex for anybody to micromanage it, and we saw the failures of Tom Wolf not only in his micromanagement or attempt to micromanage, but in his arbitrary and capricious dealings, and then his vindictive and mean-spirited and punitive actions when people didn't knuckle under and salute when he ran the flag up the flagpole.
You're running for governor in a time where I would dare say that most people in this country, no matter what the polls say, generally are very down on government in general. It's a negative feeling about it. We don't trust it as an institution. We think everybody's kind of saying things to serve themselves. How do you break through that and get back to a rosier picture of what a governor should be, or at least a more positive one?
Well, I mean, folks right now are not only angry, they're really angry, Gary, and with good reason.
Right.
I mean, look what's happened over the course of the past couple of years. People don't want some bureaucrat or some government official telling them how to lead their lives
Right.
and how to, do this and that and the other thing. And so one of the things that I'm absolutely and fundamentally committed to is individual liberty, personal freedom, and restoring those things so that people can make for themselves the decisions about how to run their lives, how to spend their money, and the things that are vital to them around the family dinner table. But, the left wing views life as a series of problems to be resolved by government bureaucrats and so-called experts, who think they're better than we are, who know they're smarter than we are, etc. I don't buy that for 1 second. I completely reject that. I trust the people. Our campaign is built around the concept of being from the people and for the people, because ultimately I believe that individual families, individual people have a better way of finding their path along life than with some government bureaucrat or agency telling them what to do.
It's such an important distinction that you make there, because for a long time, a lot of us all believed that. Now it seems like that's up for grabs, that, the idea that we can trust the people to get it right. Every time the government comes up with a brand new regulation, the people figure out a way around it. Business figures out a way around it, and you say, here's the right way of doing it. It's much more, as we said, authentic and organic in terms of coming up with those solutions. How do people say that. They say about liberty and freedom. You're a guy that's practiced that your whole life. Talk a little bit about that and take us a little bit deeper into that thought about liberty and freedom.
One of the things, Gary, that's been very troubling at both the federal and the state level is the executive branch doing things with so-called executive orders. That's not the way our founders intended things. We are having a tripartite system of government where each branch has its own power, and there's a separation of powers, and there's checks and balances and all those things we heard about back when they were teaching civics in school. And so one of the things that I would do as governor is get rid of many of the orders, edicts, mandates, etc., that have been put into place through executive order. Not just the mask mandates and all that kind of nonsense that we had to go through with Tom Wolf, but there are other executive orders that still exist that really need to be done away with. And we need to get back to quote-unquote regular order, where the governor works with the General Assembly to get things done for the people of Pennsylvania. And that's how I think you restore trust. Trust the people, include them, and they will find, again, some confidence in our institutions, because it's not just government that people have little trust in these days.
You talk about principles that govern you, and you've talked about those in a lot of these installments that we put in here. But one of the things that we see replacing principles today is agenda. And we see people going from an agenda and saying, my agenda is the way to go, and they kind of have blinders on as to what some of the real answers are to some of the real problems. How do you get by that as governor? How do you become more open to that for people, where they can say, hey, I can come to this guy with some ideas. Hey, I might be a Democrat, I might be Republican, but I got some ideas here. It just might work.
Well, you listen. Yeah. And, one of the things that I've been bolstered by is listening to the people of Pennsylvania all across this great Commonwealth, Gary, through all the days that we've been out on the campaign trail. And as you know, I'm out there doing events more in one day than some candidates are in an entire week.
Right.
Because I think it's so important to see the people where they live, where they work, across the back fence, at their doorstep, etc. Because that way you get a real sense of what the people want and need, and you're not simply shoving your ideas and your agenda onto them. So it's a matter of listening. As you know, I've put my personal telephone number out there at repeated times during the course of the campaign. Once again, it's
717
717
877 8194.
You got it, Gary. Good job. You got to give me a high five.
Here you go, man. You get a little skid on that one.
877-8194 in the 717 area code, because I'm
Right.
in good central Pennsylvania.
Now, I know it for different reasons. He's been a friend of mine for a long time, so I've known it and had it committed to memory. But Now it's out there, so you can.
And I love taking the phone calls. People
I know
often
you do.
ask me, don't you get these goofy calls? And I really have not gotten very many.
Right.
Most people have been incredibly respectful, have offered real thoughts, asked good questions, and had meaningful conversations with me, and I really appreciate it.
Let me have a final meaningful conversation with you on this segment today, because I think this is maybe the most important question of the entire campaign. And it's this. You've got 9 people out there running. At the end of all these forums and so forth, I read the newspaper articles, I watch them myself, I've been part of them, and I look at them and people say, well, I don't know there's really a whole lot of difference between each of them. They all kind of agree with certain things. There are a couple people who take snipes and so forth, other people. What makes you different from all of them?
I think a couple of things, Gary. One, my life story, which is unique in a variety of different ways.
Right.
Not born in the United States, born into incredible poverty, having to grow up the hard way, understanding the blessings that we have every single day from God and from this great state. But I also think it's my history. Candidates are bragging about, I've been to all 67 counties, and that's a good thing. They should be. I've been to all 67 counties multiple times, but I was in all 67 counties long before this campaign began. I've traveled the depth of this Commonwealth multiple times on issues that were really important to Pennsylvania. Stopping the tolling of Interstate 80, for example. Fighting for the natural gas industry and allowing it to develop and produce the jobs and the economic benefits that it has. And doing other things all across Pennsylvania for years and years and years. And I always get back to my father's old saying, which was, Charlie, before you tell me what you're going to do, and people in a campaign will tell you a lot of things, show me what you've done. So from my days with Ronald Reagan to my service as vice chairman of CPAC and to the daily work that I do as a small businessman, I really understand Pennsylvania. I understand its people. I understand the needs and desires and hopes and goals and aspirations of our fellow citizens. And that's why I'm running for governor.
And I think you have a true love for it. Every time I talk to you, I can see in your eyes, you have a true love for Pennsylvania. You've had a chance to leave several times. You've never left. You've stayed here your whole time, and you've fallen in love with the place. What was it about Pennsylvania that made you fall in love with it?
Well, it wasn't the winters.
No.
About the middle of February, I was like, why am I in Pennsylvania? But no, there's no question in my mind,
Right.
Gary, that I will die here.
Yeah.
There's just no question whatsoever. I've never left ever since we moved to Pennsylvania. You're right. I went to elementary school, high school, college, even to law school here.
Right.
Have had my entire career in Pennsylvania. Had folks begging me to come to Washington during the Reagan administration. I said, no, I'm going to stay here and work for President Reagan from a distance. And I did that. But there's something about Pennsylvania, its culture, its history. I love history. But mostly its people.
Yeah.
That make it such a wonderful place. It's a beautiful state. We've been touring the Northern Tier this week and even ran into a snowstorm on Monday.
Right.
But it's a gorgeous state, wonderful people, tremendous resources, and a future that can be unparalleled if we'll just unleash the productive energies and the productive engines of the people of Pennsylvania.
What have you learned about yourself during this campaign?
That's a great question, Gary. And, you learn what your limitations are. Clint Eastwood said a man's got to know his limitations. There are some days when I think I'm invincible, and God always has a way of showing me that I'm really not. And that, may be one of the things that I've learned. I've learned my physical limitations.
Right.
I'm a hard worker. I can run around, folks half my age.
Right.
But I have to also remember I'm the old guy in the race. And so I've had to scale it down just a little bit. But the thing I think I've learned the most is why I love Pennsylvania. And it is impressed upon me every single day.
Charlie Giroux, running for governor. And what really matters, we've talked about some of those things here this morning. You're talking about them every day out there in Pennsylvania. We'll continue to talk about them as we roll down inside the last 30 days now until May 17th. We hope you give Charlie a call at 1-717-877-8194. Yeah, that's his cell phone. And yeah, he will answer. And yes, he will talk to you. So give him a call. Use that. Talk about some of the issues that really matter to you. Ask him some questions about it. And we look forward to talking next time with Charlie right here on What Really Matters. I'm Gary Sutton.
Businessman, conservative, patriot, Charlie Giroux for governor.